Can you hear me okay? My name is Bruce Scott. I'm a psychologist and then I trained as a psychoanalyst. I work in Edinburgh, and this talk's focused on psychology. We do not have much time, so I've chosen my words carefully and written them down here. And I apologise, I have some bitter and harsh truths, and I say these truths now as we don't have a lot of time. There is no time for delay or any excuse for hesitancy now. Yes, we are in unprecedented times, not because of the deadliest virus known to mankind, but because we have never ever been attacked with such ferocious psychological methods as is deliberately being done today by our UK and Scottish governments to coerce us, manipulate us, to scare us, and to make us shame people for not following orders. Remember, brothels are open, but churches are closed. We have little time, but we have been warned by many who suffered totalitarian communism in Eastern Europe. We were warned for many decades that such a moment would come in the West if we were not awake. We have not been awake enough. We are too complacent now, and we are not being brave enough now. But there's plenty of bravery here today, I can see. As I have said, we have been warned, and we have a lot to learn from history, and from the great Russian writer and critic of Soviet communism, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, especially in our present era of the COVID-19 brave new normal. In his address to Harvard University in 1978, Solzhenitsyn said, open quotes, "Many of you have already found out, and others will find out in the course of their lives, that truth eludes us if we do not concentrate our attention totally on its pursuit. But even while it eludes us, the illusion of knowing it still lingers and leads to many misunderstandings. Also, truth seldom is pleasant. It is almost invariably bitter. There is some bitterness in my speech too, but I want to stress that it comes not from an adversary, but from a friend." Close quotes. Likewise, when it comes to our era of the brave COVID-19 brave new normal, there are many bitter truths we have to face now. As I said, the UK and Scottish governments are using applied behavioural psychology, breaking the ethical guidelines for psychologists to deliberately ramp up fear in the population. A group of psychologists called SPY-B of SAGE have been tasked with advising the UK and Scottish governments how to get people to adhere to COVID-19 restrictions. From their document, which is freely available on the UK government website, it says, open quotes, "A substantial number of people still do not feel sufficiently personally threatened. The perceived level of personal threat needs to be increased amongst those who are complacent, using hard-hitting emotional messaging." Close quotes. The psychologists of SPY-B and the UK government knew fear alone would not be enough. Therefore, SPY-B suggested to use and promote social approval for desired behaviours, to consider enacting legislation to compel required behaviours, and to consider the use of social disapproval for failure to comply, snitching. They have used the mainstream media and social media along with false fact-checking and censorship to get their message across, and it has been working. The tactics of the SPY-B psychologists and the UK and Scottish governments are contrary to the ethical guidelines of the British Psychological Society, the psychology equivalent of the Hippocratic Oath for medicine. This is a quote from the British Psychological Society Code of Ethics and Practice Guidelines. Bear these in mind and think about the fear propaganda and the restrictions on people's work, freedom to meet family, friends and loved ones. Open quotes from their document. Safeguarding. Safeguarding means protecting people's health, well-being and human rights and enabling them to live free from harm, abuse and neglect. This guidance addresses safeguarding of both children and adults. Physical abuse is the use of physical force or mistreatment of one person by another, which may or may not result in actual physical injury. This could include hitting, poisoning, deprivation of food, water, or liberty. Psychological stroke emotional abuse is behaviour that is psychologically harmful or inflicts mental distress by threat, humiliation, or other verbal and non-verbal conduct. This may include threats, blaming, controlling, intimidation, or coercion, amongst other things. Financial abuse is actual or attempted theft, fraud, or burglary. It is the misappropriation or misuse of money, property, benefits, material goods, or any other asset transactions which the person did not or could not consent to, or which were invalidated by intimidation, coercion, or deception. Institutional abuse may occur when routines, systems, and regimes result in poor standards of care, poor practice and behaviours, inflexible regimes and rigid routines which violate the dignity and human rights of the adults and place them at risk of harm. It may occur within a culture that denies, restricts, or curtails privacy, dignity, choice, and independence. It involves the collective failure of a service provider or an organisation to provide safe and appropriate services, and includes a failure to ensure the necessary preventative and/or protective measures are in place. Neglect is the persistent failure to meet basic physical and/or psychological needs. Close quotes. The disregard of ethics and the ramping up of fear and a creation of a shaming culture by psychologists is unacceptable. The result of this coercion, fear-mongering and shame-mongering has seen a massive increase in mental ill health. The risk factors for suicide have multiplied and people are killing themselves.
Heard of more people commit suicide than die of COVID. That's certainty.
The elderly and other people are too scared to leave home, and many people have died and are dying at home because they were and they are too frightened to seek medical help for non-COVID-19 illness. It has resulted in young children becoming traumatised by seeing a whole society of people with masks on and treating each other like biohazards.
Right.
And now, Nicola Sturgeon puts masks on our Scottish school children, and pupils are spied on at lunchtime to make sure they are wearing masks in shops. This is all going on, and the British Psychological Society, the regulator of psychologists, the Health and Care Professions Council, psychologists, mental health charities, politicians, and so-called political activists are completely silent about this deliberate psychological torture of our society and our children. This is unacceptable. This is complicity. The data and the science are clear. COVID-19 is not the threat or dangerous pandemic where we have to lock down society and where we have to destroy the economy. COVID-19 is equivalent to a bad flu season. The PCR test is unreliable and should not be used as a diagnostic instrument. We now have a case-demic. The hospitals are not overwhelmed, and COVID-19 is not the threat we are being told it is. Why has mask wearing not seen a reduction in the yearly average for flu deaths? Why are the politicians not yelling in anger that lockdown measures will cause more death than COVID-19? People cannot get operations. People cannot get medical screenings. People cannot see a dentist. And people cannot see their friends and family.
Yeah, exactly.
COVID-19 is an excuse to take away our freedom and liberty.
Yeah.
And remember, churches are closed, brothels are open. The rule of 6 does not apply in supermarkets. We have to wear masks in supermarkets, but Nicola Sturgeon and MSPs and MPs who are from many, many, many households, can meet in Scottish Parliament without masks. But children have to wear masks, and they're not allowed to sing in school. Nicola Sturgeon's allowed to shout in the Parliament. Children cannot say goodbye to a dying parent. And old people are dying alone, unable to be comforted by loved ones. Politicians can shout and mingle unmasked in government buildings. We can go grouse shooting though. Amazon is doing a roaring trade, as are the big multinational supermarkets, but the high street is dying. 1/5 of all small and medium-sized businesses in Scotland will not make it out of this mess.
Much more than that.
The Scottish economy has shrunk 20% since April, yet Sturgeon wants more furlough and another lockdown. She wants to destroy Scotland. There will be no Scotland left for independence.
People.
Can people see how illogical the facts are? This is deliberate. To confuse us, to frighten us, to anger us, and to demoralise us. As the KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov said, we are in the stage of demoralisation. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is not enough people with the necessary courage, but hopefully it's growing. Historically, this has also been a problem. In a critical remark and a warning to the West, Alexander Solzhenitsyn said in his Harvard address, "A decline in courage may be the most striking feature which an outside observer notices in the West in our days. The Western world has lost its civil courage, both as a whole and separately, in each country, each government, each political party, and of course in the United Nations. Should one have to point out that from ancient times, declining courage has been considered the beginning of the end." Close quotes. Let this not be the beginning of the end of democracy and freedom in Scotland. In our COVID-19 brave new normal, let us not ignore the warnings of the past and the historical events where totalitarian regimes came to flourish. A totalitarian medical technocracy is now being forced upon us. Let us be courageous. Let us be brave. We have to do this for our children and grandchildren. If we do not, they will never forgive us, and we will never be able to forgive ourselves. Thank you.